trying to see if I had anything that looked about the right size to use to show like the size of Arrietty compared to like a normal human. Check the shelves. I have an Ariel and a wedding dress. That's about what I got. That'd be about the right size or so, give or take. Yeah, about the right size for how big Arrietty would be to the human world. Maybe a tiny bit smaller. So, Studio Ghibli time again. So we are now going to be talking about The Secret World of Arrietty. Also in Japan it's known as The Borrower Arrietty. So this movie came out in 2010, so it came out the year I graduated from high school. Because I remember going to see Ponyo in theaters. I may remember going to see this one in theaters as well, but the thing is that with the Miyazaki movies, it was kind of hit or miss, if they were going to be in the theaters near me, and B, if they were going to be in the theaters near me during a time when I could go and see them. But yeah, so there's that. So the movie is actually based off of a book that is it's a young adult juvenile fantasy novel called The Borrowers by Mary Norton. And there's been other adaptations of it. I think there's at least one live action movie. The book I think was written in 70s or 80s maybe. I don't remember exactly what it said. So it's basically designed to be this concept of in this world, or it's supposed to be like in our world, there are tiny people that like live in the walls of houses, and they're called borrowers. And they take things that people aren't really going to miss. Like they take little bits of food, little bits of material, tissues, little bits of cloth, little things that get lost by humans and stuff like that, and that's where they get taken. Is that the borrowers borrow them, and then they use them to survive. They use them to build their home, to make their clothes, to make their own food, different things like that. So they have like this little interesting setup there for how they have designed this world, and I love this concept. And I like because we have like the majority of the movie takes place within one house and like a yard. And it's like they still make it feel like it's a huge world for like Arrietty and her parents and such, and for the other borrowers and that type of thing. And I love how they do that. The movie starts where we are introduced to this young boy, Sean, and he is going to go and stay at the country home, or kind of like the bit more isolated home that was the home where his mother grew up. I think it's where his aunt lives, and it's this very nice little like European style house, kind of probably around the outskirts of Japan or so, outskirts somewhere in maybe Tokyo or something like that. And what ends up happening is when he arrives there with his aunt, he ends up seeing this cat chasing something. Cat gets attacked by a crow, which I just personally think that means that that it's a reference to The Cat Returns, because you have Muta and Toto fighting each other in that one a lot, and then in this one it has a crow and a cat that are fighting, which is just kind of funny. And Sean goes over and he sees the cat, and the cat cat goes off, and then he thinks he sees something in this little bush. And he thinks he catches this glimpse of this little tiny girl. He then has to go back into the house, or has to head into the house, and we get to meet the little girl. Her name is Arrietty, and she is this little borrower. As I said, her and her parents live within the walls of this house, and they have lived there for several generations. And what are you doing? Why are you chewing your foot? Okay, fine. And her and her parents live inside the walls of the house, and we see Arrietty making her way from the little bush into the house, into like the little cracks and crevices and like underneath the house area and stuff like that. And she gets chased by the cat again, and she, you know, keeps getting away from the cat and everything. The cat kind of, I guess, kind of sees them as pests, which is fair enough to a degree, from the cat's perspective, or the cat's just being a jerk. I don't know which. But so Arrietty, we see her making her way through. We see like her comparison size to like crickets and grasshoppers and stuff like that. And she had snuck out of the house to go and get different, some different like herb leaves and some little flowers and stuff like that. And she like snuck out of the house to go and get that. And her, you know, she gets back, and almost as soon as she gets back, her mother's like, "You snuck out of the house again." And she's like, "Come on, Mom, I'm already, you know, I'll be 14 soon," and blah, 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 blah. You know, it's the whole argument of like, you know, it's the same argument of like Ariel and Little Mermaid. "I'm 16 years old. I can get married." No, you're not. No, you're not ready to get married yet. But Arrietty is like, you know, I'm almost 14 years old, and I should have the chance to, you know, be out and be borrowing and everything like that. You know. And what ends up happening is, you know, like she's talking with her mom. She got her mom like a bay leaf and that type of stuff that they can use for their, you know, their spices and everything like that they need. Arrietty's room is amazing. It's filled with all these different like plant cuttings and stuff like that she's managed to get over however many times she sneaks out of her room and all of that. And I love the design of her room. It's awesome. And like we get to get this good view of like what their home looks like, which really the way that they have designed their home, and I love how they did this in the movie, is clearly a lot of thought went into the design of this place. Because like, you know, like in our, you know, like here I have like pictures on my wall that are posters. Their pictures are like stamps that are like on the walls and like framed and stuff like that, which is adorable. And there's other stuff like they have like windows, but obviously the windows don't really look outside. They have like, you know, landscapes on the back, you know, either painted on the window or on, you know, the window is like just like some little piece of poster board that they found or something like that to put in the window, so they have like a nice scenery to look at. We see, you know, some of the stuff is obviously that they were able to make themselves. Other stuff is like little things that were lost. And I just love the design of how they have the house built, because it's clearly lots of found objects. Like some of the stuff obviously would be like the tables and chairs, and some of those things would be stuff that they would be able to like carve themselves. But other ones are obviously like they have like a little teapot set that has like 3 little cups that like those were probably like maybe from a dollhouse set that got thrown out at some point in time, and one of the borrowers managed to salvage them and keep them. So they would have those and like other things like that. Like they have like a little stove that they've made. They have a fireplace that's like a upside down potted, you know, plant jar and everything like that. And like so many different things like that for how they have this place designed. And I love how they did it. But like Arrietty has her own room. Her parents have their own room. They have like a little living room, kitchen type area and everything like that. That's like, clearly this is a place that was built up over several generations of borrowers living in this house. And so we get to see all of that. And then we are introduced to, as I said, we're introduced to Arrietty's parents. Homily is her mother. Very panicky woman. In regards to some stuff. And then we are introduced to Arrietty's father, Pod. And it is supposed to be that night is supposed to be when Arrietty is going to go out into the house with her father for the first time to do her first borrowing. And there's this, you know, this whole conversation that happens between her parents that's just like, oh, there's, you know, you have to be careful because there's beings in the house, and human beings. There are, you know, and there's a new one in the house and everything like that. And, you know, it's like, that's Sean, who's the new one. And, you know, we know that, you know, the other 2 members of the family that live in the house, or the other 2 residents of the house, we have Hara, who is like the maid of the house, who is this kind of crotchety old woman to a degree who knows that there's like something in the house, but she can't figure out exactly what it is. And it's like she kind of knows about the borrowers, but she can't, like, she doesn't have proof that they exist, and anyone she tells thinks she's crazy, which is fair. And then we have Sadako, who is actually, she's not Sean's aunt, she's his great aunt. And in the Japanese, his name is Sho instead of Sean, so they just kind of changed that a little bit, which is fine. When I was looking through when I was like looking over stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, that's, you know, the nanny, or not the nanny, the maid is like, her name's Hara, and I was just like, Hara, and I had a quick panic attack because I'm like, oh no, it's not Haru. It's not Haru. She's not Haru grown up and turned into a crotchety old woman from The Cat Returns. She's not that. We're fine. But, you know, so we're kind of learning a little bit about, you know, the family and everything like that. And we're seeing Arrietty getting ready to go out to do her first borrowing. And, you know, her parents kind of have a little bit of a, you know, communicate, you know, her parents are kind of like discussing stuff like, well, Arrietty's off doing something else, and Arrietty's like, stop worrying, mother, we'll be extra careful. And she's like, and Pod's like, Arrietty will be 14 soon. And the mom's like, some days she'll have, or no, it's the dad that says, someday she'll have to survive without our help. And the mom's like, sometimes I think we're the last borrowers in the world, because like, we find out later on that there had been like 2 other families of borrowers that lived in the house before Arrietty was born. Because, like, you know, the houses are so big, and this is a very nice house, that there would be lots of little places for them to be able to hide and make little homes, that one of the families ended up just kind of disappearing. Like, either they were captured by the humans and something happened, or, you know, an animal got them or something, but one of them just disappeared and the other one moved. So they're the last borrowers left in this house. And there's not a lot of other borrowers around that they would be able to have communication with, just simply because of the fact that, you know, a big distance for a borrower to travel is, you know, within the house is already a big distance for them to be able to travel, let alone going outside and, you know, having to traverse through the yard and traverse even past the yard, and, you know, further and further away, it's, you know, it's harder and harder for them to be able to go. So having communication in that area with anyone that's outside of the house, let alone outside of the yard, would be kind of hard to do. So I can understand where they're coming from with that worry. But so Arrietty is getting ready to do her first borrowing, and she's being very practical about what type of an outfit she should wear. And so we see her looking through her clothes, and she ends up picking this nice, you know, pretty little red dress, and, you know, clipping her hair back with like a little, you know, clip of some kind, which is adorable. And her and her dad are getting ready to head out, and the mom's like, I wish you would wear something darker and longer. That's funny. My thought in regards to the mom is, in regards to Homily, is she probably used to be like a borrower that would go out into the house and stuff like that with either her parents or with Pod at various different times. But she's just kind of become much more of a homebody in that regard, and doesn't really want to go out because she gets kind of very worried almost anytime either Pod or Arrietty are outside the house, because she's so worried that a being is going to see them and capture them and then come looking for more, and, you know, capture all of them and everything like that, or that the cat might get Pod while he's out or whatever. So that type of a thing. So Arrietty and Pod start making their way into the house, and again, I love how they have this designed. Is you know, well, first she has to like slightly battle off like a cricket or something like that, or grasshopper or whatever it is that she has to like battle off, which doesn't take very long. She just scares it off and it runs away, and the mom's like panicking while she watches. And then we see as Arrietty and her father are making their way through the house, because like there's lots of places where like the nails stick out of the wall so they can like walk on the nails to get to higher areas. There's, you know, staples in the wall from, you know, where they've had to staple wood in, and, you know, they climb up those. Pod has made these different devices all over the house for them to be able to use to go up, a good distance, very quickly and stuff like that by using, bits and bobs and stuff like that that he's found around the house when he's been borrowing. And it's borrowers only take what they need. They don't just like take stuff willy-nilly. And it's always stuff that the humans won't miss. Things like that. And so that's where they're working on trying to get stuff, and like they're supposed to get sugar and tissue paper, which is some of the stuff that they need in the house, in their little houses, that stuff. And as they're going around, they're working their way through, and like we see Hara and the great aunt are like talking to each other and stuff like that, and we find out by little bits of their conversation that it's Sean is going to have an operation in about a week, and that his intention, that they're bringing him out here so he can get like some fresh air and relax and everything like that before he's going to go and have his surgery. We find out later on that he has like heart problems, a weak heart. We don't find out exactly what it is, but he has heart problems, and that he's going to have surgery. We find out that his parents are recently divorced, but that neither of them are around right now to kind of take care of him at the moment, so that's why he's here just before the surgery and everything like that. And he's supposed to just relax and take it easy and not get too riled up or anything like that. So we're kind of hearing bits of those conversations, and kind of the first part that I love how they make this place seem so huge from Arrietty and Pod's perspective is when they get into the kitchen, and like it's completely dark in the kitchen. There's just like the moonlight from outside, and we see Arrietty on like the ledge of like this cabinet looking out over the kitchen. And it's like, I made the comparison when I was watching it that I'm like, it's like her looking out over this is kind of like a human looking out over like the Grand Canyon or something like that, for like how far they could fall and how far away things are, and how vast this place seems in comparison to the other areas, the little areas that she's been to before and stuff like that. So we have all of that there for them to look, for like that size comparison. And I love it's like, to us a kitchen does not seem very big, but to this little tiny person it seems vast, and like so far to get from one side to the other for like what for humans would just take like a couple of steps, if that. And they do a great job, and that's one of the ways that I love how they do the animation in this movie, is they do a wonderful job of making you feel the size and the vastness of these differences that Arrietty and her parents and other borrowers would have to traverse in order to get what they need. So we have it that Arrietty and her father have to get across the kitchen to where the sugar bowl is. So, Pod is making his way across the kitchen. We had seen like his little workshop earlier inside of like part of the walls of the house, where he's like, he has different tools waiting for him based on what his intention is to go after that night. And we see him that earlier he had cut apart several things of like double-sided double stick tape, so that way he can he climbs down from where he was, from where him and Arrietty joined or came into the kitchen, makes his way across the floor, and then he like uses the double stick tape on his gloves to like climb up the table like a spider would or something, and like climb up the table leg to get to where the sugar bowl is, so he can pull out like a cube of sugar. And then we see Arrietty on the other side, like after he like holds up that he got it, she's like which is adorable. And then she has like a hook that she's able to use to like rappel, hook the clip the hook into the wood, and then like rappel down the side of like whatever it is she's trying to climb, and then get practice and like whip the hook off and have the hook again, kind of like Indiana Jones and his lasso. Also, one of the first things they find when they're going through the house is they end up finding this, kind of a needle pin that Arrietty can then, she can have it as like her first borrow, and she can use it to be able to, as like a sword type of a thing. And I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to be, but it is kind of a little bit like similar to like Arya in Game of Thrones, who has her needle as her sword, who has her little tiny sword, dagger named Needle. And I love that. I just like, I don't think it's meant to be a reference to that, but I love that concept that is very similar to something that Arya would do. Um, um, but what ends up happening is, of course, so now they have the sugar, and Arrietty puts the sugar in her bag, and then he's like, okay, now we have to go and get tissue paper. So they start making their way through the house again, and they probably have different points set up around the house for them to be able to use to like climb up or spring from one level to the next to get up to where they need to go. And they end up making their way through the house, and then they end up coming out into, making their way through the walls, and then coming out into what is essentially this beautifully made dollhouse that sits in the room where Sean is staying. And Arrietty and her father, come into this place, and it's gorgeous, and like everything is their size. The chairs, the tables, the paintings, the kitchen, all of it is their size. And it's gorgeous. And the dad's like, this is something that the humans call a dollhouse. This place is for toys, and is for dolls. We are not dolls. We are not pets. We cannot take anything from here because the humans will notice that it is missing. And Arrietty's like, but this place would be perfect for us to live. And the dad's kind of like, yeah, I know, but no, we can't stay here because like it could be a trap set by the humans, and if we take something, then they'll know that there's something here and different things like that. And so they make their way out of the house, and out of the little doll house, and over to where the tissue box is. And while they're trying to get the tissue out, Arrietty ends up looking over, and she sees that Sean is awake, because it's the room where Sean is staying, and even though all the lights are off, Sean's still awake. And he looks over, and he's like, he's like, I knew I saw you, or something like that. And Arrietty had claimed earlier to her parents that no, the new being didn't see me. It's fine. He didn't see me. It was fine. Kind of not true now. He saw you. And what ends up happening is, this kind of causes Arrietty to like freeze up for a second, but she manages to keep her cool, and her father are able to like sneak away. Unfortunately, in the process, the cube of sugar ended up falling out of her bag, so they don't have the sugar either. And Sean just tries, Sean kind of very quietly is like whispering, please don't go, I didn't mean to scare you, that type of a thing. And that type of thing, like her and her father make their way back into the walls and everything like that, and he, Pod kind of like calms her down, and he's like, it's okay. Lesser borrowers would have panicked in that situation. So it's like the fact that she didn't panic and she stayed calm was a very good thing. She didn't like start screaming or whatever the way that her mother would, the way that Homily would. So they start making their way back down, and they just end up, when they get back to the house, they end up telling Homily that like, oh no, the light that he has like busted on the way up, so they didn't get very far, and so they weren't able to get the sugar or the tissue, that type of a thing. And Homily's like, well, that's okay, you're both home safe, that's the important thing. And what ends up happening is, Arrietty shows her mom her new, needle sword type of a thing. So we have that. And the next day, Arrietty is just kind of, the next day while it's raining, Arrietty is just kind of waiting in like the under part of the house. Like, I don't know exactly what that part is called, where it's just like, it's not the basement because they don't have a basement, but it's like between the base of the house and the ground. Crawl space, I don't know exactly what it's referred to as, but like they have that, and she's like underneath that area, like just watching as like it's raining from behind like the grate that leads there. And so like she interacts with the bugs a lot. There's like roly-polies that are rolling around, and she picks one up and it rolls up, and she kind of throws it up and down a couple of times and then lets it go. Uses it as a ball, which is kind of cute. And then while she's waiting, while she's just kind of sitting there, we see, human legs appear in front of the grate, and we see Sean bend down, and he leaves a little sugar cube with a little note. And Arrietty, she runs over and she kind of looks at it after Sean walks off, and she realizes it's the same sugar cube she dropped the night before, and she ends up going back to her parents and explaining what happened as they're eating lunch. And she's like, it's the same sugar cube I dropped last night. And the dad's like, you can't touch it, it's a trap. And the mom's like, wait a second, you guys did interact with a human? And Arrietty's like, I'm sorry. And they're like, so does this mean that we're going to have to move? And they're like, I really don't want to. I don't want to have to move, because this has been their home for however many generations at this point in time. But it's just like, we don't have to make that decision yet. We don't know 100% if we've been seen yet or not, but we are going to have to start preparing if that ends up being the case. So that's kind of like their intention in that regard. They have to start kind of planning whatever is going to happen next. And so later that day, Arrietty and her mom are out doing the laundry because the rain stopped, and they're letting it dry in the sun that comes through the grate into the under the house and everything like that. And Homily goes back inside to lay down, and Arrietty goes outside, and she actually sees a bunch of ants have come over and started like eating the sugar cube and carrying away bits. And she ends up picking up the sugar cube and looking at the note, and the note's like, you forgot something is what it says. And like, kids got better handwriting than I do, in all honesty, for writing that small on that little piece of paper. And so what ends up happening is she ends up, she's like, okay, well, I have to return this, and I have to like make him leave us alone. So she gets changed into like her little adventuring outfit, and she ends up climbing up the side of the house. Well, this is happening, like her mom's laying down in there in like her parents' room, and like her dad's like working in like his little workshop area and stuff like that. Again, I love the design of this house. It is beautifully done. And how they would figure out, okay, well, this is how they would be able to do that, and this is how they would be able to do that for what they would be able to have their hands on and stuff like that. So I just love that concept. And I mean, like, a lot of that is coming from the original book, and like other things that they probably would have seen in other movies and shows and stuff like that, where they deal with that. Like a good comparison in for One Piece stuff is the Tontatas. Is we have all the little Tontatas that are like little fairies and stuff like that in Dressrosa, and how small they are compared to humans and stuff. And like the same thing in for like Peter Pan, there's all of the pixies and Pixie Hollow and everything like that. So there's like those different types of comparison of different sized creatures and stuff like that. All of that stuff. So what ends up happening is Arrietty is like, she's determined to go and like talk to Sean, and she ends up climbing up the wall on the outside, because they have like plant vines that go up the outside of the wall. She climbs up that and gets up to his window. And while they're there, while they're talking, okay, so before I get to that conversation, there had been a conversation that happened between Sean, Hara, and his great aunt, where, something gets brought up about seeing like little people in the house or something like that, and Sean says he hasn't. And what ends up happening is his great aunt goes, and she takes them into the room where the dollhouse was, because like Sean mentioned the dollhouse, and she takes them into Sean's room and like shows them the dollhouse and how beautiful it is. And then she shows them the kitchen, and she's like, so what it was she explains it like, so your grandfather had always had this idea that there were little people living in the walls, and he had this dollhouse built for them, so that way they could come here, and they could be able to live here in this dollhouse in the house, as opposed to like having to hide in the walls and scurry about and everything like that. And your mother, Sean's mother, also very much liked this idea as well. And the dad, Sean's grandfather had like the oven in the little kitchen really works, and like there's all these beautiful paintings and everything else that's in the house. So it's all designed specifically to be the right size for all of the people, for all the little people, so that way they could live there. And the aunts and the great aunts like, yes, but it never happened. None of the little people ever showed up or anything like that. And everybody just kind of thought your grandfather was crazy. Again, I don't blame them. And while all of this conversation is going on, the maid Hara is just being kind of suspicious the whole time, which is just kind of funny. And trying to see if she can convince Sean to reveal that maybe he did see something or whatever. She also ends up talking to a delivery guy that's just do you know any good pest control pest control people? And he's showing her a listing on his phone, because this is happening in modern day type of thing. Well, 2010 modern day, with their level of phones, which I think would have still been the majority of flip phones for most people. But what ends up happening is, so the the nanny, or not the nanny, the maid is a little bit, obsessed with trying to find the little people in the walls, because everybody thinks she's crazy for the fact that she thinks that they're there. And so we had all that conversation. So then what happens is Arrietty climbs the wall on the outside and gets to where Sean's window is, and she drops the sugar cube in, and they have this conversation where she is explaining that, or he's I want to talk to you, and she's humans are dangerous. And he goes and she's if we're seen, we have to leave. My parents said so. And he's you have a family? I envy you. And they have this whole conversation where, she's explaining that, our family don't take things. We don't take things we're not supposed to. We don't take anything that's, valuable or anything like that. We just take, the stuff that we need to survive. And he, they're having this conversation, and I love the way that it's designed, because it's Sean is sitting in the room on his bed, and he has the screen from the window between him and the outside, and then Arrietty is standing on the side of this leaf where she is backlit by the sun, where he can see her little silhouette. So they're both talking to each other, but there's still this thing in the way. For Arrietty, it's the leaf to the screen, and then for him, it's the screen to the leaf. While they're having this conversation, and he ends up explaining that his name is Sean, and she's well, my name's Arrietty, of course I have a name, type of a thing. And they're having this conversation that still is kind of very she doesn't want to give too much information away, because she doesn't want to reveal where her and her parents might be. But it's also, other stuff where she's, she doesn't want to get too close to him, type of thing, but she is intrigued by him. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is the crow ends up flying at the window where Arrietty is, and almost attacking her, and gets his head stuck in the screen on the window. And Sean, rushes over and is trying to, get the crow out of the window, and trying to get Arrietty, who's kind of, because of the crow making, flapping its wings, it's making, gusts of wind, and Arrietty is hanging onto a leaf so she doesn't get, blown out of the way. And, he gently, is able to gently grab her in the leaf and bring her inside. And this is when Hara shows up, and she's able to, get the crow out of the window. And, she's worried that Sean got too, excited because of all of that, or could have gotten hurt and everything like that. And, he's, hiding the leaf behind his back the whole time. And Arrietty, sneaks out of the leaf and sneaks off. And, so Sean's a little sad that she's, that she left. And so during this time frame, or the next day or whatever, we have it that Arrietty and her mother are in the kitchen of their home, and Arrietty is crushing up these biscuits to assume make, I'm guessing, their version of flour. well, their mom's sewing, and when Pod gets home, it's actually revealed that he actually got injured while he was out, on a borrowing mission, and he ended up getting help by this other borrower whose name is Spiller, who is a borrower that kind of lives more off in the wild area as opposed to like in a house. And so that's like the first borrower that Arrietty has ever met, the first stranger in that regard of her own kind that she's ever met is Spiller. And I love the mom's always like, why is my first thought whenever your father doesn't come home right away that he got eaten by the cats. So I like that. And so we have this this moment where like Pod got hurt, so they're taking care of Pod's leg, and like Arrietty is getting introduced to Spiller, and he's about the same age as her. And one of his things is he has like a bow and arrow that he fights with, which is there's a lot of characters that use bows and arrows, but I kind of think that that's like a reference back to Akatashi or something like that. Also, given how he's dressed is kind of similar to the way that we see Akatashi dressed in Princess Mononoke. And what ends up happening is Arrietty tries the bow and arrow, and it doesn't she can't quite do it, and he like shows her how much force it takes to actually make the bow and arrow work. And like the mom is basically trying to play matchmaker between Arrietty and Spiller, and Pod explains that he was out trying to find a safe path for them to be able to use, so that way they could leave the house now that they've been seen by a being. And how Spiller was helping him. Miss Spiller explains that he's seen some other borrowers, but not too many. So they're okay, well maybe she's like, well maybe my the mom's like, well maybe Uncle blah 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 is still alive, and that type of thing. So they're having that conversation, and Arrietty and Spiller are kind of getting to know each other type of a thing is how they're kind of working that out. And so they head off. So she sees him off, and like his dinner, he literally has like a cricket leg that he's holding up to show that he has something to eat for dinner, and they're just like, oh, okay, type of thing. So that's fine. During all this time frame, we see different moments of like of Sean wandering around the house, and assuming he's trying to find where the borrowers live. He does succeed because the next day or 2 days later or whatever, Arrietty and her mom are working on like trying to sew a big bag that they can use to take stuff with them. And mom chastises Arrietty because her sewing isn't quite where it needs to be. The stitches are too big. And we see the dad, and we see Pod, and he's like making like weaving baskets and stuff like that they can use, so that way they can carry their stuff when they're going to leave. And they're having these conversations, and this is where Arrietty is finding out that there had been other borrowers that had lived in the house before them, or when before Arrietty was born, one of them left and one of them disappeared and stuff like that. And now maybe it's time for them to move on from this place as well. And of course, Arrietty doesn't want to leave because the place is her home, and Homily doesn't want to leave because, again, it's her home. And Pod kind of doesn't want to either, but he also knows that he needs to keep his family safe. And the better likelihood of them being able to remain safe is if they leave this house and go and try to find a new place where they can live. And what ends up happening from there is, while Arrietty and her father are talking, they start hearing this, loud sounds and shaking and everything, and, stuff starts, shaking around them, and they run out of the hall, or run out into the hall to where the kitchen is, which has now been blocked. And we see that, Sean has found where they are, underneath, like, the floorboards of the house. Sean has found where their house is, and he's, like, he's lifted up the cover that they have on the house. He pulls out the wall that is like their kitchen wall, sets that aside, not just like throws it away, but just sets it aside, and that he places down the kitchen from the dollhouse into the area where the kitchen was. And like while all this is going on, like Homily is like running around in the kitchen and like freaking out and everything like that. And Arrietty and Pod are trying to get inside so that way they are able to so they can try to save Homily. And what ends up happening is, so Sho leaves the new kitchen there, and then like puts the cover back on top, and like when like Homily was about to pass out, and he like carefully put the couch behind her so she would like land on the couch as opposed to like falling on the ground. So Sho was at least cautious enough to do that. And then he like covers everything back up, but like Hara is kind of like on her way back in. So he has to like hastily shove everything else back into the closet that's on top of where the floorboards are that lead to where the borrower house was. So we have that where he's like having to hastily shove everything back in there. And what ends up happening is Arrietty and her father manage to get into the room, main part of the house, after all that happens, and Homily is just like staring at the kitchen, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Remember how I always said I wanted a new kitchen?" So we have that whole, funny bit there. And, so that's made the decision that, okay, the humans definitely know that we are here. And if one knows, then others are bound to find out. And that means that we have to leave. We have to go. And so we see it that they're working on packing everything up and everything like that. And Arrietty, the mom wants to try to take a whole bunch of extra stuff that they really don't need. They're just supposed to only try to take the stuff that they really, really need to take with them, because most of the stuff can be like replaced later on. And like the dad, Pod is just like, do not take anything from the dollhouse. Do not take anything from that kitchen. And the mom's like, oh, mom's kind of sad about that. I mean, like, I guess the ideal thing that could happen, that does not happen in the movie, but that could have happened, was either if, Arrietty's ancestors had decided to live inside of the dollhouse and been, like, friends with the humans that lived in the house and that type of a thing, that would have been one thing. But then again, there could always be the problem that they would get found out by other people, and that they would then, get captured or experimented on or something like that to determine what they are, because that's the way that a lot of human beings are, unfortunately. Is like, oh, this is different, let's dissect it, and study it and see what it is and everything like that. So there's all of that stuff. And I mean, Sho knowing about them, and had he not actually done too much else, probably they may have been able to stay in the house. But it's like if one human finds out about them, then other humans can find out about them as well. And so that's kind of what their intent, what's going on. And at some point in this time frame, Sean had come by, and he like left a flower with like a little card on it in front of like the grate again to give to Arrietty. And what ends up happening is Arrietty heads out into the yard later, and Pod's off, working on trying to find like a good route for them to use to escape and everything like that. And Homily is like working on packing and all of that. So Arrietty makes her way out to the garden where Sean is relaxing and like petting the cat, who has kind of warmed up to Sean a bit more. And by the way, I don't remember the cat's name. Don't remember the cat's name at all. Not at all. And what ends up happening is she shows up and she starts talking to Sean, and Sean has to keep making sure that the cat doesn't attack her. And she's explaining again, like, the fact that, okay, so you found us, and that means we have to leave. And he's like, I'm sorry, I thought that maybe giving you the kitchen might be a good way of, trying to help make things better for you guys. And she's like, no, it doesn't help. It just proves that you found us, and, we don't want to steal anything, and blah, 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 blah. And this is where Sean ends up explaining to her that, that he has the heart condition and that he's going to have surgery soon, but he doesn't know if it's going to work or not. And he's like, well, when I saw you, since I can't really help anybody, I thought maybe if I saw, since I saw you, that maybe I could find a way to help you. So he wants to try to find a way to help Arrietty and her family and everything as best as he can. And so it's like, the intention is good, coming from a good place. He's not intending to try to hurt them. He's not intending to try to get them in trouble or anything like that. He just wants to try to help them. But it's, again, it's, the human version of trying to figure out, the human being version of trying to figure out something, and then like the Arrietty version, the borrower version of trying to figure out what's going on, for what would be the best way to help. And by technicality, the best way to help would have been for him to just like ignore it and not pay attention to it and just let Arrietty and her family be, and then they probably would have been able to stay in the house. That type of a thing. And while all of this is going on, they're having this whole conversation and everything like that. And, they have this conversation, while they're having the conversation, Arrietty, Sean makes a comment that, well, maybe other borrowers are extinct and everything like that. And Arrietty gets, very angry about this. And she's like, no, that's not true. Spiller has told us that he knows other borrowers, and we're going to be leaving, and that's where we're going to go. And we're going to find these other borrowers, and everything is going to be fine. And everything like that. And like, so they're having this full conversation there. And so it's this very interesting, way of like, they're actually opening up, having this whole, heart-to-heart conversation, literally, in this regard. And, I don't know exactly how to describe it. It's just this very good way of having this, explanation as to, like, how these two are very similar in the fact that Sean did want to try to help them, and that Arrietty is very interested in humans, but it's a danger to her kind if she tries to become friends with him. And she's like, we have to leave even though it's dangerous, because if we stay here, then, because it's like, you're fine, you're not trying to hurt us necessarily, but, there's the psycho maid that, that might try to do something against us. Back to the psycho maid. Back to Hara, who's not really psycho. She's just kind of very obsessed with this. And Hara is, going through, and she ends up finding, all the stuff falls out of the closet when she tries to open it. And she ends up finding, there's a floorboard area, and she lifts it up, and she finds, like the cover for where Arrietty and her family's house was, and part of the kitchen sticking out, part of the dollhouse kitchen sticking out, and she looks under it, and she sees the dollhouse kitchen and homily, and ends up, picking up homily and taking away her teacup, and, putting homily in her, pocket on her, on her apron, and, heading into the kitchen and everything like that. And she puts homily in a jar with, plastic wrap on top, and like pokes holes in it so she can breathe, and puts her in the pantry. And while this is going on, homily is like screaming and everything like that, and Arrietty and Sean out in the garden end up hearing it. And so Arrietty is like, oh no, something's wrong, and she starts making her way back to the house. She gets into the kitchen where where homily is gone. She gets to the house where homily is just gone, and she ends up then climbing her way up to Sean's room. While this is going on, Hara, after she's put homily in the pantry, she's gone up and she's like locked Sean in his room from the outside so he can't get out. And Arrietty makes her way up to Sean's window, and she explains that her mother was taken and everything like that. That I think my mother's been taken by a being, and he's like, okay, well, I'll help you. And he tries to go through his bedroom door, but he can't get out. So they end up having to get out of his window and climb across the roof, in bare feet. Climb across the roof to the other room, to the other window that leads into another room that's like a storage room. And Arrietty, because the window is locked, she has to climb through a little area in the window that she can get through, and like uses earrings and like little spikes on her shoes to like climb up the the curtain to then get to the lock and open the lock, which I love. And then, Sean comes inside, and they're able to get out, and they make their way down to where the borrowed's house was, and he moves, the top of it, and they see again the homily is gone, and he takes the kitchen from the dollhouse out and takes it and he hides it in the bushes outside the house, and ends up covering up their house again. And then he's like, okay, we have to figure out where must have been Hara. We have to figure out where she took your mother. While this is going on, Hara is on the phone calling the extermination company, and she's having this conversation with them because she called them already to show up at the house, and they're like, well, we missed what road is it? And she's like, what do you mean what road, what bridge? There's only one road. And getting angry about that stuff is trying to find their way to the house, which of course gives Arrietty and Sean time to look around. And they're trying to look around the kitchen to try to maybe figure out where Homily is. And Hara shows up, or they hear Hara coming, and Sean, hides Arrietty for the moment. And Hara is very, very surprised to see that Sean is there because she had locked him in his room. And she's like, and he's like, can I have some more milk? And she's like, okay. And she ends up looking over at glaring at the pantry to a degree for a moment. And so Sean's like, okay, well, that's where Homily is. That's where the mom is. And well, Hara is, getting him, warm milk. And he's like, can I have some cookies too? And she's like, no, he wants cookies. Type of a thing. And he's like, he goes over to where Arrietty is hiding, and he has his hands behind his back, and he's pointing over to where the pantry is, and Arrietty can go over, makes her way over there to the pantry, so that way she can get inside and try to, find her mom, climbing the stuff that's in there to get to the shelf where Homily is. And she does manage to find her mom, and she uses her needle sword to cut open the plastic on top, so that way she can get her mother out. And at that point in time, Homily is now out of the jar, so she's safe, safer. And the exterminators have arrived, and Hara goes out to get to the exterminators and talk to them, and they start going around the house, and she's like, that's okay, just go around the house and see what you find. So they're doing a general inspection and everything like that. And Sean goes into the pantry, sees that Arrietty and her mother are fine. Homily kind of freaks out when she sees Sean. And is just Homily is just very panicky in that regard. Again, I don't blame her given what just happened to her. And so Arrietty and her mother head back to where their home is. And when at this point in time, the pest control people are looking around. The aunt has shown back up again, and she's talking to Hara, and she's like, just make the pest control people leave. There's nothing here for them to worry about. And Hara is like, no, I have proof. And she takes the aunt upstairs, the great aunt upstairs, and to where Sean is now sitting in his bed again, just relaxing and reading. And she's like, no, those little thieves stole the kitchen out of the dollhouse. And she opens the dollhouse, and the kitchen is right where it's supposed to be. And she's like, but it was gone. It was and she's just starts kind of starting to crack a little bit. And so there's that. And what ends up happening is she's panicking, and she's running downstairs, and the aunt is looking at the Homily's little teapot got left in the kitchen, and it had a little bit of tea in it, so it still smells like herbs and stuff. And she opens the pot, and there's a little leaf inside, and she's like, they really exist, don't they? And she looks at Sean, and he's like, yes, but they don't mean us any harm. They're not trying to steal things. They just take what they need. And she's like, I really wish your mother was here to be able to see this and everything like that. She would be so happy. And he's like, they're not evil like Hara keeps saying. And then like the aunt goes downstairs to where like Hara is, and she's like dug out the stuff in the closet and like showing her, um like she lifts up the floorboard to be like, see, this is where their little nest is. And the aunt looks, and it's just all a pile of like junk at this point in time. Like the house that Arrietty and her family had lived in is like gone. It's like compiled in on itself and like just kind of fallen apart. And so there's no evidence of them there. So my thought is the way that they were able to do that so quickly is that Pod probably had something designed that he could, or like when the house itself was being made or whatever, that there are like fail safes in the house that if they need to destroy the house to hide the fact that there was a house there at all, they can, pull a certain brick or something like that so that everything else will collapse in on itself and just like crumble, for their little home. And so that's covered, and Hara is just like freaking out even more because she's like, wait a second, no, there was something here, I swear. And she's like, wait a second, I captured one of them in a jar. And she runs into the pantry and she like pulls out the jar, and the jar is empty, and she's like, no. And she's just like freaking out even more. And like the pest control guys come in, and they're like, so we're ready to do a little more inspection of the house or whatever. And she's like, her kind of like comes out of the kitchen, and she's kind of wobbly, and the pest control people are like, are you okay, ma'am? Like making sure she's okay. And she's like, she's holding the jar, and she's like, where's my lady? Where's my lady? And she's like, I had a lady in the jar. And the pest control people are just like, what the heck is going on here? And Hara is just like breaking down. She's like, I think Hara cracked. I think Hara needs to go on a vacation. In therapy. And she's just like, I wasn't lying. And she's just like, so, everything like that. And she's like, it was like, I'm not crazy. And I'm like, yes, you are crazy now, lady. And so they have that whole moment there with Hara just like breaking down, which is just hilarious to watch. And so then we cut to that night where Arrietty and her parents have left, and they have like the bare minimum of stuff like packed on them that was like stuff that they had packed and were able to grab and everything like that they're leaving. And their intention is to make it to this little stream creek area where Spiller is waiting for them, so that way he can like take them down the creek to where he knows there are other borrowers, and they can go and start making a new life there. Possibly they're like, it might be Homilly's family, the mom's family. And Arrietty is sad about having to leave her home and everything, and while they're taking a break, she ends up meeting the cat, and the cat, isn't trying to attack her or anything like that like it kept doing before. And like it goes back to the house. Sean ends up waking up in kind of the middle of the night and goes out, or a little before dawn, and goes out, and he sees the cat, and the cat then leads him to where Arrietty and her parents are. And Arrietty and her parents have found where Spiller is waiting with like a teapot ready to like carry them down the river and everything like that. And they are talking and getting everything packed into the boat, the teapot boat. And Arrietty ends up hearing Sean, because he's like shouting or whatever, or he's like showing up on like this little cliff area, and she like climbs up to find him. And they're having this very nice conversation where where they're having where they're getting to say goodbye. And she's like, well, how did you find me? And he's like, he like lifts up the cat, and like, so Arrietty's like able to like pet the cat for like the first time. I have that like nice little thing where now the cat's like their friend and everything, so that's just fun. And so Sean and Arrietty are getting to say goodbye, and he like gives her a little cube of sugar to remember him by. And she's like, and she like pulls out her hair clip, and she like gives it to him, which to him is just like so tiny it barely fits on his finger. But that's going to be like a treasured object to him from now on, and someday may have to explain to a future wife why he has it in the first place. Why do you have that clip, and why don't you ever want to throw it away? And he's like, it was a gift from a friend. So they have that, would be like that concept. And, you know, she starts, Arrietty starts crying as she's like kind of holding on to one of his fingers as they're, saying goodbye, because like he knows they're never going to be able to see each other again. No matter how much they want to. And she's like, thank you for being my friend, and thank you, for helping me save my mom and all of that stuff. And he's like, I really hope that you have the best life. And he's like, my heart is strong now, Arrietty, because you are in it. And so, she's, they say goodbye and she heads off. While they were having this conversation, Spiller had actually climbed up the wall, saw that she was talking to a human, and had pulled out his bow and arrow to, get ready to try to shoot Sean. Thankfully, he did not. And, Sean is, he's going to have his surgery the next day and everything like that. So, Sean's really kind of anxious about that, but he's also, much more calm now. And all of that, because he was able to help Arrietty. He was able to make a difference and all of that. And they say goodbye, and she climbs back down and gets in the boat, teapot boat, and, we see them sailing off. In the Disney dub, there is a little extra monologue that gets added in by Sean, where he states that he never saw Arrietty again, but he returned the next summer, and he ends up hearing that other people in a different house ended up having little things going missing and everything. So it's just like, it's supposed to be like this little bit like, yes, they survived, they kept living and everything like that. And like as the teapot boat's like sailing down the stream, we see Arrietty and Spiller kind of, interacting with each other, and he's like clearly like the little boy, the boy that has the crush on the girl, because he's like trying to give her food, but he's very awkward about it and everything like that. So we have like that thing. And like over the end credits, they have like some nice songs that get played. There's some nice songs throughout the movie that they use as like background music that are very cute, and all of that. So that's about where that ends. So this movie has 3 different casts. So they have the original Japanese cast, and then they actually have an English UK voice dub, where they have Saoirse Ronan as Arrietty, who has been in so many other things much more lately. Tom Holland, so Spider-Man, plays Sean. Olivia Colman plays Homily, the mom. Olivia Colman has been in a lot of other movies lately. She was in a series called Broadchurch with David Tennant, where they play detectives. Those are about the only names I recognize on this list. And then on the English dub side, for the American US English Disney dub, Bridget Mendler plays Arrietty, David Henry plays Sean, Amy Poehler plays Homily, plays the mom. What else? Will Arnett, so Lego Batman, plays Pod. And then my favorite is Carol Burnett, plays Hara. Carol Burnett is an amazing comedian actress. She can do amazing actress in general. She can do comedy, she can do drama, she can do whatever in between. She is amazing. I love her. I love that she's in a Studio Ghibli movie. She's great. I love the fact that her, Betty White, and Lily Tomlin, and Cloris Leachman, who are all 4 just amazing actresses in their own right, are all in Studio Ghibli movies. I love that. That just makes me so happy in that regard, because the other 3 were in Ponyo in the previous movie, and then now Carol Burnett is in this one. If you want to see anything amazing, just type in Carol Burnett show, and you will find amazing skits and musical numbers and everything like that from it. I cannot praise Carol Burnett enough for how amazing she is in pretty much any role that she plays. And I love the fact that she's in a Miyazaki movie. So that's what I have here for this. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't watched Arrietty for a while, go and watch Secret World of Arrietty. It's amazing and wonderful, as is pretty much almost every single Studio Ghibli movie. So I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.